your ghost host. Kindly step all the way in, please, and make room for everyone. There's no turning back now. Our tour begins here in this gallery, where you see paintings of some of our guests as they appear in a corruptible mortal state. Welcome to a night of horror tales. It is I, your host, D-Man XD007, and we have a few more guests that are coming shortly thereafter, into their afterlife, if you will. Tonight, we are going to be telling some really wonderful, spooky tales. Things of horror lives past, Halloween's past, present, and future. Spooky, scary skeletons sending shivers down your spine. We begin with a lovely, tiny little tale that romanticized the horror genre way back when. It is a tale most would know from the archives of one Sir Edgar Allan Poe. Let me just find it super quickly. I hope you all are enjoying your day. Oh shit, I should have marked this a while ago. Crap. There you are. Okay. Our first tale begins in the wonderful years of old in New Hampshire by Sir Edgar Allan Poe. The Raven. Once upon midnight dreary, why ponder, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore. While I nodded, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis a visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this, nothing more. Ah, distinctly I remember, it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished them, vainly, some tomorrow, for my wits surcease of sorrow of the lost Lenore. Oh, a rare and radiant gift from the angels of Lord, they may sleep forever. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now stood still the beating of my heart. I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door, some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. It is nothing more." Presently, my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore, but the fact is I was napping. So gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there. Nothing more. Back into the chamber. All my soul within me burning. Soon again I heard a tapping, somewhat louder than before. "Surely," said I, "surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see then, what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind, and nothing more." Open here I flung the shutter, when with many a flirt and flutter, in there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, nor not a minute stopped or stayed he, but with mien of lord or lady perched upon my chamber door, perched upon a bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, perched and sat, and nothing more. Then this ebony bird beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore. "Oh, thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou," I said, "art sure no craven, ghastly grim and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore." Quoth the raven, "Nevermore." Much I marveled at this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevancy bore. For we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door. Bird or beast upon the sculptured bust above his chamber door, with such a name as Nevermore. But the raven sitting lonely on the placid bust spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour. Nothing farther than he uttered, not a feather than he fluttered. Still I scarcely more than muttered, other friends have flown here before, on the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before. Then the bird said, Nevermore. Startled at the stillness broken by reply so aptly spoken. Doubtless, said I, what it utters is its only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master, whom's unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster, till his songs one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope in the melancholy burden bore of nevermore. With this I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This in my more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining, on the cushion's velvet lining the lamplight gloated o'er, but whose velvet violet lining with the lamplight gloating o'er, she shall pass nevermore. Then the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer, swung by seraphim whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent thee, by these angels he hath sent thee. Respite, and nepenthe from thy memories of Lenore. Quaff, oh, quaff this kind of nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, and prophet still if bird or devil, whether tempest sent, or whether tempest tossed thee here ashore, desolate, yet all undaunted on this desert land enchanted. Oh, by horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore. I thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, by that heaven that bends above us, by that God, tell this soul with sorrow great, if within the distant Eden it should clasp its sanctity. Sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked upstarting, get thee back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie thy soul hath spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. Take thy peak from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door. Still is sitting on alabaster glass just above my chamber. His eyes warm the that black board throws his shadow on the floor, and my soul found that did do it, yes. That is one of our co-hosts in the background, if you were able to hear them. That is Ashley Thereon joining us in just a little bit. But yes, I figured might as well start off with something fun. The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. Coming up next, we have... outside disappeared. Ta-ta! Yeah.
I love it. I start with one of our reassurance. Nothing more elegant. This story it is a story I like I see worse. Something see. I can sit. In a summer of it was almost midnight, and needless to say, as was usual, it was not unusual. A dull hum. I know that I looked I'm sure. Just a seemingly headlights on. One of those when you start waking up, 10 seconds are in the eye. I drove all the way home to ship, knowing something was the car was pretty old. It was the first time I was by some glitch. This other car had some 10 seconds. Check it out.
Oh, they can't hear you? Because it's too up high. Oh, they can't hear you at all. Okay, we'll fix that. Yeah, I'll let you let you reread that one. Yeah, that's why I bumped the mic up for you. I am in the room with you. Yes, the voice needs to be turned up more. Okay, let me go ahead, bring this up to here. Yes. Hi, hello. I'm back. I'm in the portrait now. I'm gonna let Alex reread his story because I didn't realize that I did not realize that the mic was turned down so low. But it's quite all right. I'm gonna go and let you hear his dulcet tones yet again. Yes. Yes, spooky, scary skeletons indeed. And don't worry, we have Ashley Thereon on deck in just a moment. So, for those who missed it, the Raven, shit, what's his name called again? Darkness in the Rearview Mirror, and we have another wonderful tale coming up soon. So sorry, Alex, please feel free to come back in. Sorry about that.
Well, that must have been just scary, hearing absolutely nothing for the past couple minutes, but I'm back. So, let us begin once more. Yeah. Gotcha. And I hope this sounds good, but if not, let me know, and we will make adjustments from there. So this story, once again, is called Darkness in the Rearview Mirror. And it is a story that I read once before, but I would like to read it again, because, I did just read it, but I did read it before, and it's a slightly chilling story. It is only a few minutes long, so I hope you'll indulge me once more. Again, this is Darkness in the Rearview Mirror. I have always been uneasy driving alone at night. It was worst the first few times when I had just gotten my license, but the nagging fear has never gone away to this day. It's disorienting to look into the mirrors and see nothing, and I mean nothing, but the consuming blackness of the night. It makes me hesitant to check the mirrors should I see the dark void, or worse, someone sitting in the back seat staring at me. In the summer of 2013, I found myself driving home alone on Highway 902 from a party. It was almost midnight, and needless to say, it was pitch black. As was usual at night, I was on edge. I had the radio off and could hear nothing but the muffled roar of tires on pavement and the dull hum of the engine. I stole a glance into the middle rear view mirror and saw nothing but darkness through the back window. I know that I looked backward and saw nothing. I'm sure of it. Just the seemingly endless blackness of the night. I remember it so clearly because not 10 seconds later, a car passed me on the left. Headlights on. I had one of those sudden adrenaline rushes, like when you think you see a person outside your bedroom window when it's just a tree, or when you start awake at night with the feeling of falling. 10 seconds earlier, nothing had been behind me. Suddenly, a car. I drove all the way home shivering and knowing something was off. The next morning, I found 2 sets of scratches near the back of my van. One was on the left rear, one was on the right. The car was pretty old. They could have been there for months. But that was the first time that I distinctly remember seeing them. In hindsight, there are 2 possibilities for what happened that night. Possibility 1, by some glitch in reality or something paranormal, this other car had somehow appeared behind me within 10 seconds of me checking my mirror. Like some weird ghost crap or something. However, the second option is what makes my blood run cold when I consider it. It didn't even occur to me until months after the fact, but it makes me dread driving alone at night even more. Possibility 2. The car was normal. It had approached me from the rear and passed me to my left. However, something large and wide, as black as night, had been clinging to the rear of my car, obscuring my view through the window and leaving deep scratches on the sides. And that is where our story ends once more. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy what comes next. And let us know if we need to make any changes. Up next, our guest, Ashley Thereon, will be joining us to woo us with tales of grandeur.
All right, were you guys able to hear him that time? I hope so, because everything was great. Come back here, you little raven. Why you little... It's always the raven. Always the raven. Now, so we're going to be disappearing for a hot second here, because we have a lovely little tombstone to come and visit you. Give us just a brief moment. Boop. I am now gone. But wait. Here we are. Our newest host. We have Ashley Thereon here to read about what may happen in certain science labs if you do not pay close attention. Well, here they are with SCP-4845. 485. Welcome, Ashley Thereon.
Hey. How are you? Let's get this started then. SCP-4885. Item number SCP-4885. Object class Keter. Special containment procedures. Currently it is theorized that SCP-485 is contained. To further elaborate, SCP-485 is contained within an unknown Class 17 containment chamber in an unknown site. In the event that SCP-485 breaches containment, procedure... I don't know what that word is. Invendium Aeum is enacted, which consists of the following procedures. 36 Class 17 containment chambers are connected to an independent self-driving vehicle at all times. 216 inactive containment chambers are readily available in case of sudden and unforeseen breach of SCP-485's containment. Spooky. One Class D subject of stable mental health is subjected into each vehicle, driven into the system, and cryptographically secured pseudonym number is generated to choose a random number between 1 and 36, and the vehicle is to be transported to a containment chamber based on the number chosen. Each containment chamber has a single digital motor that is capable of outputting video at 7p resolution. Once a Class D subject is transported to a random chamber, a message is sent to every monitor simultaneously. This message consists of the location of SCP-485 delivered via implanted tracking device. The GPS is only accessible by Level 5 personnel or SCP-485's containment staff on a need-to-know basis. After approximately 2 hours, each containment chamber is transported to randomly designated Foundation site via self-driving trucks. Trucks are disguised as packaging service in order to prevent suspicion. In the event an accident occurs during the stage procedure, Invent-EM is to be enacted again. Let's get to the meat of the story, shall we? SCP-485 is an autonomous humanoid resembling the main character of the popular puzzle series Where's Wally, also known as Where's Waldo. This entails that SCP-485 wears a horizontal red and striped shirt, a red and white bobble hat, and jeans. However, a noticeable difference in appearance is from the character is the entity has paler skin and lack of eyes. In the event that the subject knows of SCP-485's current location at any given time, SCP-485 will move to the nearest wall and begin to phase into it. SCP-485 will appear inside of the subject and will reach up the esophagus and grab the subject's chin through their mouth. SCP-45 will then proceed to pull itself through the subject, destroying their internal organs and their spine. Once this has occurred, a yellow liquid will exit the corpse's mouth and will cover the subject entirely. Oh, where was I? SCP-45 will remain as... no, you got me off of my game, Alex. Alright. Will remain in its current location, occasionally patrolling the area until another person discovers its location once again. However, if SCP-485 is close enough to the subject when they discover its body, they will instead approach the subject, attempt to climb into the subject's mouth, and enter their abdomen and exit through the subject's pelvis. During that time, SCP-485 can easily dislocate and relocate a joint in its body and its skin and muscles, and will gain the consistency of a malleable solid, allowing it to easily climb into and out of the subject. SCP-485-1 instances are anomalous corpses that were created by SCP-485. The entire body of SCP-485-1 instance is covered in illustrations similar to those found in Where's Wally books, with many different characters appearing on the instance's skin. These illustrations originate from the liquid that exits the corpse's mouth. Currently, no instances of the cartoon character Wally have been found on SCP-485-1 instance. These illustrations cannot be removed from the subject unless the skin it's placed on is removed. If a subject knows of the location of any SCP-485-1 instance, forward SCP-485 will teleport itself to the subject and kill them in the exact same manner as if they discovered SCP-485 itself. This will also transform them into SCP-4885-1 instance. SCP-485 was discovered residing in location redacted within a small wooden house. Mobile Task Force Chi-19, Unrelenting Punishment, was sent to capture an entirely separate anomaly and did not know of SCP-4885's existence. And here is a log. Mic check. Yep, all good. Equipment check. Everything's working as intended. Ditto. Transcript number 67. We are entering the house. No one's talking to you, Melly. Oh, stop it. Now it is not the time, Kurt. Sorry. The group enters the house. Initial descriptions of the object were a pair of black spectacles capable of killing the user and covering their body in strange pictures from an unknown children's book. It was obviously stay professional. I just want to bring some life to these to M-1's robotic speech. I'm trying to keep my job, Kurt. Right. The group searched the ground floor for the object and begin to go upstairs. Scraping noises are heard below them, and the group does not notice this. There's a picture on the wall. Yeah, it looks weird, like crayon. Take a picture. Already on it. Good. Think this has something to do with the anomaly? Of course. It looks like Waldo. Do any of you have any idea where the object may be? I think it's in here. Which room is this? The ballroom. There's a toilet, a shower. Yeah, I think it's the shower. Why did I say bathroom? The room is circular. A normal porcelain toilet on the other side of the room. There is a small depression into the floor leading to a small drain. Strange. Something just happened in the room, so I'm... Ah! Master D-Man's alarm clock went off. M3 activates the switch. The water begins to come out of the sprinkler. I stand corrected. Who's paying the water bill for this to work? Is it still hot? M3 touches the water and recoils in pain. God, scolding! Who is the... I've discovered the object. It was resting on the toilet. Is seen holding a pair of black circular glasses. The lenses appear to be missing. Good. You know the drill. Good. You know the drill. M-2 carefully examines the object, checking for fingerprints or any traces of evidence. A small set of fingerprints are discovered on the temples of the glasses, which are revealed to be his own. Yup, these are the ones. I'll put these back in a baggie real quick. M-2 produces a small plastic bag from a small container around the waist and places glasses on the table. There's an inscription here. It's in redacted. Where? Over here on the wall. The phrase redacted is seen on the wall in redacted. This is definitely not here when we first got here. Should we leave it be and tell command about this? It's most likely magnetic. Here, let me translate it. I have the training. Huh. Well, never mind. Doesn't appear to be magnetic. It says the basement. The corpses from the children's book are in the basement. He is here too. And then it's cut off. Take a picture and we'll send it back. M2 begins to groan and hold their stomach. Are you okay? What happened? A set of fingers exit M2's mouth and grab their jaw. Hands push down, launching the jaw across the floor. SCP-4885 exits M2's body. What the fuck? Both M1 and M3 begin shooting SCP-4885. The entity exiting M-1 and shoves its fingers down their throats and begin clawing into their mouth by unhinging their jaw. Please, fuck, oh god, please, command, we're at location redacted. I repeat, location redacted. We need assistance. AAC to help the audio is abruptly severed and long. When the transcript was received by a nearby site, the site almost immediately went into lockdown. SCP-4885 killed most of its personnel. The O5 Council enacted an emergency meeting. Procedure AM was created. Shortly after this, the procedure was enacted. SCP-4885 was theorized to be contained. All information regarding SCP-4885's location of discovery was removed via an automatic algorithm, and SCP-4885's file was created. And that was that. Well, I believe I will get another reader here very soon.
Yes, welcome. Please give a lovely hand to Ashley Thereon. It is your host yet again. I am back now. We're going to hide the tombstone and the Ahaga face. Yes, hello. I am back now. Ah, good to see you. Yes, good. I am back, and I have another wonderful, thrilling tale to tell you all. A lovely legend of Sleepy Hollow. So, written by Washington Irving, found among the papers of the late Diedrich Knickerbocker. That is Knickerbocker. I should probably write that so y'all don't think I'm saying something else. There we go, that word. A pleasing land of drowsy head it was, of dreams that wave before the half-shut eye, and of gay castles in the clouds that pass, forever flushing around a summer sky. Castle of Indolence. In the bosom of one of those spacious coves which indent the eastern shore of the Hudson, at that broad expansion of the river, denominated by the ancient Dutch navigators of the Tappan Zee, and where they always prudently shortened sail and implored the protection of St. Nicholas when they crossed, there lies a small market town, or rural port, which by some is called Greensburg, but which is more generally and properly known by the name of Terrytown. This name was given, we are told, in former days by the good housewives of the adjacent country, from the inveterate propensity of their husbands to linger from about the village tavern on market days. Be that as it may, I do not vouch for the fact, but merely advert to it, for the sake of being precise and authentic. Not far from this village, perhaps about 2 miles, there is a little valley, or rather lap of land among high hills, which is one of the quietest places in the whole world. A small brook glides through it, with just murmur enough to lull one to repose, and the occasional whistle of a quail or tapping of a woodpecker is almost the only sound that ever breaks in upon the uniform tranquility. I recollect that when a stripling, my first exploit in squirrel shooting was in a grove of tall walnut trees that shades one side of the valley. I had wandered into it at noontime, when all nature's peculiarly quiet, and was startled by the roar of my own gun as it broke the Sabbath stillness around, and was prolonged and reverberated by the angry echoes. If ever I should wish for a retreat whither I might steal from the world and its distractions, and dream quietly away the remnant of a troubled life, I know of none more promising than this little valley. From the listless rippos of the place and the peculiar character of its inhabitants, who are descendants from the original Dutch settlers, this sequestered glen has long been known by the name of Sleepy Hollow, and its rustic lads are called the Sleepy Hollow Boys throughout all the neighboring country. A drowsy, dreamy influence seems to hang over the land and to pervade the very atmosphere. Some say that the place was bewitched by a high German doctor during the early days of the settlement. Others, that an old Indian chief, the prophet or wizard of his tribe, held his powwows there before the country was discovered by Master Hendrik Hudson. Certain it is, the place still continues under the sway of some witching power that holds a spell over the minds of the good people, causing them to walk in a continual reverie. They are given to all kinds of marvelous beliefs and subject to trances and visions, and frequently see strange sights and hear music and voices in the air. The whole neighborhood abounds with local tales, haunted spots, and twilight superstitions. Stars shoot and meteors glare oftener across the valley than in any other part of the country, and the nightmare with her whole ninefold seems to make it the favorite scene of her gambles. The dominant spirit, however, that haunts this enchanted region and seems to be commander-in-chief of all the powers of the air is the apparition of a figure on horseback without a head. It is said by some to be the ghost of a Hessian trooper whose head has been carried away by a cannonball in some nameless battle during the Revolutionary War, and who is ever and anon seen by the country folk hurrying along the gloom of night, as if on the wings of the wind. His haunts are not confined to the valley, but extend at times to the adjacent roads, and especially to the vicinity of a church at no great distance. Indeed, certain of the most authentic historians of those parts, who have been careful in collecting and collating the floating facts concerning this specter, authentic historians caught that, allege the body of the trooper having been buried at the churchyard. The ghost rides forth to the scene of battle in nightly quest of his head, and the rushing speed with which he sometimes passes along the hollow, like a midnight flash, is owing to his being belated and in a hurry to get back to the churchyard before daybreak. Such is the general purport of this legendary superstition, which has furnished materials for many a wild story in that region of shadows. And the specter is known at all the country firesides by the name of the Headless Horseman of Sleepy Hollow. It is remarkable that the visionary propensity I have mentioned is not confined to the native inhabitants of the valley, but is unconsciously imbibed by everyone who resides there for a time. However, wide awake they may have been before they entered that sleepy region, they are sure in time to inhale the witching influence of the air and begin to grow. Yeah, sorry, Buddha, I cannot hear the alerts. I knew you were trying to fuck with me. Playing spooky skeletons, you son of a bitch. Let's see here, where was I? Inhale the witching influence of the air and begin to grow imaginative to the dreams and see apparitions. I mention this peaceful spot with all possible laud, for it is in such little tired Dutch valleys, found here and there, embosomed in the great state of New York City, that population, manners, and customs remain fixed, while the great torrent of migration and improvement, which is making such incessant changes in other parts of this restless country, sweeps by them unobserved. They are like these little nooks of still water, which border a rapid stream, where we may see the straw and bubble riding quietly at anchor, or slowly revolving in their mimic harbor, undisturbed by the rush of the passing current, though many years have elapsed since I trod the drowsy shades of Sleepy Hollow. Yet I question whether I should not still find the same trees and the same families vegetating in its sheltered bosom. In this byplace of nature, there abode, in a remote period of American history, That is to say, some 30 years since, a worthy wight of the name of Ichabod Crane, who sojourned, or as he expressed it, tarried in Sleepy Hollow for the purpose of instructing the children of the vicinity. He was a native of Connecticut, a state which supplies the Union with pioneers for the mine as well as for the forest, and sends forth yearly its legions of frontier woodmen and country schoolmasters. The cognomen of Crane was not inapplicable to this person. He was tall, but exceedingly lank, with narrow shoulders, long arms and legs, hands that dangled a mile out of his sleeves, feet that might have served for shovels, and his whole frame most loosely hung together. His head was small. Outrageous accent, yes, right, there we go. Now we're getting into the fun of it, yes. His head was small and flat at top, with huge ears, large green glassy eyes, and a long snipe of a nose, so that it looked like a weathercock perched upon his spindle neck, to tell which way the wind blew. To see him striding along the profile of a hill on a windy day, with his clothes bagging and fluttering about him, one might have mistaken him for the genius of famine descending upon the earth, or some scarecrow eloped from a cornfield. His schoolhouse was a low building of one large room, rudely constructed of logs, the windows partly glazed, then partly patched with leaves of old copybooks. It was most ingeniously secured at vacant hours by with Caribbean accent? Oh, damn you, Ashley. God damn it. Fuck buckets. Okay, good. I was like, that's gonna teeter into racism real quick, Ashley. Fuck, where was I? So that though a thief might get in with perfect ease, he would find some embarrassment in getting out. An idea most probably borrowed by the architect Jost van Houten from the mystery of an earpot. The schoolhouse stood in a rather lonely but pleasant situation, just at the foot of a woody hill, with a brook running close by and a formidable birch tree growing at one end of it. From hence, the low murmur of his pupils' voices conning over their lessons might be heard in a drowsy summer's day, like the hum of a beehive, interrupted now and then by the authoritative voice of the master, in the tone of menace or command, or peradventure by the appalling sound of the birch, as he urged some tardy loiterer along the fiery path of knowledge. Truth to say, he was a conscientious man, and ever bore in mind the golden maxim, spare the rod and spoil the child. Ichabod Crane's scholars certainly were not spoiled. I would not have imagined it, however, that he was one of those cruel potentates of the school who enjoy in the smart of the subjects. On the contrary, he administered justice with discrimination rather than severity, taking the burden off the backs of the weak and laying it on those of the strong. Your mere puny stripling that winced at the least flourish of the rod was passed by with indulgence, but the claims of justice were satisfied by inflicting a double portion on some little tough, wrong-headed, broad-skirted Dutch urchin who soaked and swelled and grew dogged and sullen beneath the birch. All this he called doing his duty by their parents, and he never inflicted a chastisement without following it by the assurance so consolatory to the smarting urchin that he would remember it and thank him for the longest day he had to live. When school hours were over, he was even the companion and playmate of the larger boys, and on holiday afternoons would convoy some of the smaller ones home, who happened to have pretty sisters or good housewives from others, noted by the comforts of the cupboard. Indeed, it behooved him to keep on good terms with his pupils. The revenue arising from his school was small, and would have been scarcely sufficient to furnish him with his daily bread. Commentary on modern times for teaching, Look at that. For he was a huge feeder, and though lank, had the dilating powers of an anaconda. But to help out his maintenance, he was, according to country custom in those parts, boarded and lodged at the houses of the farmers, whose children he instructed. With these, he lived successfully a week at a time, thus going the rounds of the neighborhood with his worldly effects tied up in a cotton handkerchief. That all this might not be too onerous of the purses of his rustic patrons, who are apt to consider the costs of schooling a grievous burden, and schoolmasters as mere drones. He had various ways of rendering himself both useful and agreeable. He assisted the farmers occasionally in the lighter labors of their farms, helped to make hay, mended the fences, and took the horses to water, drove the cows from pasture, and cut wood for the winter fire. He laid aside, too, all the dominant dignity and absolute sway with which he lorded it in his little empire, the school, and became wonderfully gentle and ingratiating. He found favor in the eyes of the mothers by petting the children, particularly the youngest, and like the lion bold, with which whilom so magnanimously the lamb did hold, he would sit with a child on one knee and rock a cradle with his foot for whole hours together. In addition to his other vocations, he was the singing master of the neighborhood and picked up many bright shillings by instructing the young folks in psalmody. It was a matter of no little vanity to him on Sundays to take his station in front of the church gallery with a band of chosen singers, where, in his own mind, he completely carried away the palm from the parson. Certain it is, his voice resounded far above the rest of the congregation, and there are peculiar quavers still to be heard in that church, which may... And that was not in the Disney. It was not in the Disney No games, you're correct. Certain it is, his voice resounded far above the rest of the congregation, and there are peculiar quavers still to be heard in that church, and which may even be heard half a mile off, quite to the opposite side of the mill pond, and on a still Sunday morning, which are said to be legitimately descended from the nose of Ichabod Crane. Thus, by divers still little makeshifts, in that ingenious way which is commonly denominated by hook and by crook, the worthy pedagogue got on tolerably enough, and was thought by all who understood nothing of the labor of headwork to have a wonderfully easy life of it. The schoolmaster is generally a man of some importance in the female circle of a rural neighborhood, being considered a kind of idle, gentleman-like personage, of vastly superior taste and accomplishments to the rough country swains, and indeed inferior in learning only to the parson. His appearance, therefore, is apt to occasion some little stir at the tea-table of a farmhouse, and the addition of a supernumerary dish of cakes and sweetmeats, or, peradventure, the parade of a silver teapot. Our man of letters, therefore, was peculiarly happy in the smiles of all the country damsels. How he would figure among them in the churchyard, between services on Sundays, gathering grapes for them from the wild vines that overran the surrounding trees, reciting for their amusement all the epitaphs on the tombstones, or sauntering with a whole bevy of them along the banks of the adjacent mill pond, while the more bashful country bumpkins hung sheepishly back, envying his superior elegance and address. From his half-itinerant life, he was a kind of traveling gazette, carrying the whole budget of local gossip from house to house, so that his appearance was always greeted with satisfaction. He was moreover esteemed by the woman as a man of great erudition, for he had read several books quite through, and was a perfect master of Cotton Mather's History of New England Witchcraft, in which, by the way, he most firmly and potently believed. He was, in fact, an odd mixture of small shrewdness and simple credulity. His appetite for the marvelous and his powers of digesting it were equally extraordinary, and both had been increased by his residence in this spellbound region. No tale was too gross or monstrous for his capacious swallow. It was often his delight, after his school was dismissed in the afternoon, to stretch himself on the rich bed of clover bordering the little brook that whimpered by his schoolhouse, and there con over old Mather's direful tales, until the gathering dusk of evening made the printed page a mere mist before his eyes. Then, as he wended his way by swamp and stream and awful woodland to the farmhouse where he happened to be quartered, every sound of nature at that witching hour fluttered his excited imagination. The moan of the whippoorwill from the hillside, the boding cry of the tree-toad, that harbinger of storm, the dreary hooting of the screech owl, or the sudden rustling in a thicket of birds frightened from their roost. The fireflies, too, which sparkled most vividly in the darkest places, now and then startled him, as one of uncommon brightness would stream across his path, and if by chance a huge blockhead of a beetle came winging his blundering flight against him, the poor Valo was ready to give up the ghost, with the idea that he was struck by a witch's token. His only resource on such occasions, either to drown thought or drive away evil spirits, was to sing psalm tunes, and the good people of Sleepy Hollow, as they sat by their doors of an evening, were often filled with awe at hearing his nasal melody, in linged sweetness long drawn out, floating from the distant hill or along the dusky road. Another of his sources of fearful pleasure was to pass long winter evenings with the old Dutch wives as they sat spinning by the fire with a row of apples roasting and sputtering along the hearth, and listening to their marvelous tales of ghosts and goblins, and haunted fields, and haunted brooks, and haunted bridges, and haunted houses, and particularly of the headless horseman, or galloping Hessian, of the Hollow, as they sometimes called him. He would delight them equally by his anecdotes of witchcraft, and of the direful omens and portentous sights and sounds in the air which prevailed in the earlier times of Connecticut, and would frighten them woefully with speculations upon comets and shooting stars, and with the alarming fact that the world did absolutely turn round, and that they were half the time topsy-turvy. But if there was a pleasure in all this, while snugly cuddling in the chimney corner of a chamber that was all of a ruddy glow from the crackling wood fire, and where, of course, no spectre dared to show its face, it was dearly purchased by the terrors of his subsequent walk homewards. What fearful shapes and shadows beset his path, amidst the dim and ghastly glare of a snowy night? What with wistful look did he eye a trembling ray of light streaming across the waste field from some distant window? How often was he appalled by some shrub covered with snow, which, like a sheeted spectre, beset his very path? How often did he shrink with curdling awe at the sound of his own steps in the frosty crust beneath his feet, and dread to look over his shoulder, lest he should behold some uncouth being tramping close behind him. And how often was he thrown into complete dismay by some rushing blast howling through the trees, in the idea that it was the galloping Hessian on one of his nightly scourings. All these, however, were mere terrors of the night, phantoms of the mind that walk in darkness. And though he had seen many spectres in his time, and been more than once beset by Satan in divers shapes, in his lonely perambulations, yet daylight put an end to all these evils, and he would have passed a pleasant life of it. And despite of the devil and all of his works, if his path had not been crossed by a being that causes more perplexity to mortal man than ghosts, goblins, and the whole race of witches put together, and that was a woman. Women! Among the musical disciples who just assembled one evening in each week to receive his instructions in psalmody was Katrina Van Tassel, the daughter and only child of a substantial Dutch farmer. She was a blossoming lass of fresh 18, plump as a partridge, ripe and melting with rosy cheeks as one of her father's peaches, universally famed not merely for her beauty but for her vast expectations. She was withal a little of a coquette, as might be perceived even in her dress, which is a mixture of ancient and modern fashions as most suited to set off her charms. She wore the ornaments of pure yellow gold, which her great-great-grandmother had brought over from Sardam, the tempting stomacher of the olden time, and withal a provokingly short petticoat, to display the prettiest foot and ankle in the country round. Bow, bow. Ichabod Crane had a soft and foolish heart towards the sex, and it is not to be wondered at that so tempting a morsel soon found favor in his eyes, more especially that he had visited her in her paternal mansion. Old Baltus Van Tassel was a perfect picture of a thriving, contented, liberal-hearted farmer. He seldom, it is true, sent either his eyes or his thoughts beyond the boundary of his own farm, but within those everything was snug, happy, and well-conditioned. He was satisfied with his wealth, but not proud of it, and piqued himself upon the hearty abundance rather than the style in which he lived. It is a long one, I'm sorry, guys. His stronghold was situated on the banks of the Hudson, in one of those green, sheltered, fertile nooks in which the Dutch farmers are so fond of nestling. A great elm tree spread its broad branches over it, at the foot of which bubbled up a spring of the softest and sweetest water, in a little well formed of a barrel, and then stole sparkling away through the grass to a neighboring brook that babbled along among alders and dwarf willows. Hard by the farmhouse was a vast barn that might have served for a church, every window and crevice of which seemed bursting forth with the treasures of the farm. The flail was busily resounding within it from morning to night. Swallows and martins skimmed twittering about the eaves, and rows of pigeons, some with one eye turned up, as if watching the weather, some with their heads under their wings or buried in their bosoms, and others swelling and cooing and bowing about their dames, were enjoying the sunshine on the roof. Sleek, unwieldy porkers went grunting in the repose of an abundance of their pens. From hence sallied forth, now and then, troops of sucking pigs, as if to snuff the air. A stately squadron of snowy geese were riding in an adjoining pond, convoying whose fleets of ducks, regiments of turkeys were gobbling through the farmyard, and guinea fowls just fretting about it like ill-tempered housewives, with their peevish, discontented cries. Before the barn door strutted the gallant cock, that pattern of a husband, a warrior and a fine gentleman, clapping his burnished wings and crowing in the pride and gladness of his heart, sometimes tearing up the earth with his feet, and then generously calling his ever-hungry family of wives and children to enjoy the rich morsel which he had discovered. Now, the pedagogue's mouth watered as he looked upon the sumptuous promise of luxurious winter fare. In the devouring mind's eye, he pictured to himself every roasting pig running about with a pudding in his belly and an apple in his mouth. The pigeons were snugly put to bed in a comfortable pie and tucked in with a coverlet of crust. The geese were swimming in their own gravy, and the ducks pairing cozily in their dishes, like snug married couples with a decent competency of onion sauce. Ooh, God, I'm hungry now. Okay. And the porkers he saw carved out the future's sleek side of bacon and juicy, relishing ham. Not a turkey, but he beheld daintily trussed up, with its gizzard under its wing, and a peradventure a necklace of savory sausages. And even bright Chanticleer himself lay sprawling on his back in a side dish with uplifted claws, as if craving that quarter with his chivalrous spirit disdained to ask while living. As the enraptured Ichabod fancied all this, and as he rolled his great green eyes over the fat meadow lands, the rich fields of wheat, rye, and buckwheat, and Indian corn, the orchards burdened with ruddy fruit, which surrounded the warm tenement of Van Tassel, his heart yearned after the damsel who was to inherit these domains, and his imagination expanded with the idea how they might be readily turned into cash, and the money invested in immense tracts of wild land and shingle palaces in the wilderness. Nay, his busy fancy already realized his hopes, and presented to him the blooming Katrina, with a whole family of children mounted on the top of a wagon loaded with household trumpery, with pots and kettles dangling beneath. And he beheld himself bestriding a pacing mare with a colt at her heels, setting out for Kentucky, Tennessee, or the Lord knows where. When he entered the house, the conquest of his heart was complete. Let me just check and see how... My God, this is quite long. Tell you what, we're going to skip ahead. I did not realize this was going to be so long. Tell you what, we're going to skip from their meeting all the way to... Oh, shoot. Yeah, this is going to take quite a while, so we're going to skip ahead. Just a wee bit. Actually read his own horror. Yeah, sorry, Alex. My bad, guys. I thought this was going to be a lot shorter. It's like, oh, there's a lot of detail here. There's a lot of detail here. Okay, so picture this. Brom Bones, the local bully, finding himself very, very jealous of one Ichabod Crane in his pursuits of one Katrina Van Tassel, having thought that Miss Katrina Van Tassel was his own betrothed and beloved, decides to abuse the idea of Ichabod being cut a lot out. Yeah, exactly. Abuse the idea that Ichabod Crane was one very superstitious person. So we're gonna go ahead and skip to. How about? Here we go. All right. After the party, after the thrilling tale of the Headless Horseman that Brom Bones told, of the head being shot off with a cannon, of bloody war and vengeful spirits, they had now reached the road which turns off to Sleepy Hollow. But Gunpowder, who seemed possessed with a demon, instead of keeping up it, made an opposite turn and plunged headlong downhill to the left. This road leads through a sandy hollow, shaded by trees for about a quarter mile, where it crosses the bridge famous in Goblin Story, and just beyond swells the green knoll on which stands the Whitewatch Church. As yet, the panic of the steed had given his unskillful rider an apparent advantage in the chase, but just as he had got halfway through the hollow, the girths of the saddle gave way, and he felt it slipping from under him. He seized it by the pommel and endeavored to hold it firm, but in vain, and had just time to save himself by clasping old Gunpowder around the neck, when the saddle fell to the earth and he heard it trampled underfoot by his pursuer. For a moment, the terror of Hans von Ripper's wrath passed across his mind, for it was his Sunday saddle, but this was no time for petty fears. The goblin was hard on his haunches, an unskillful rider that he was. He had much ado to maintain his seat, sometimes slipping on one side, sometimes on another, and sometimes jolting on the high ridge of his horse's backbone with a violence that he verily feared would cleave him asunder. An opening in the trees now cheered him with the hopes that the church bridge was at hand. The wavering reflection of a silver star in the bosom of the brook told him that he was not mistaken. He saw the walls of the church dimly glaring under the trees beyond. He recollected the place where Brom Bones' ghostly competitor had disappeared. If I can but reach that bridge, thought Ichabod, I am safe! Just then, he heard the black steed panting and blowing close behind him. He even fancied that he felt his hot breath. Another convulsive kick in the ribs, and old Gunpowder sprang upon the bridge. He thundered over the resounding planks. He gained the opposite side, and now Ichabod cast a look behind to see if his pursuer should vanish, according to rule, in a flash of fire and brimstone. Just then, he saw the goblin rising in his stirrups, and in the very act of hurling his head at him, Ichabod endeavored to dodge the horrible missile, but too late. It encountered his cranium with a tremendous crash. He was tumbled headlong into the dust, and Gunpowder, the black steed, and the goblin rider passed by like a whirlwind. The next morning, the old horse was found without his saddle, and with the bridle under his feet, soberly cropping the grass at his master's gate. Ichabod did not make his appearance at breakfast. Dinner hour came, but no Ichabod. The boys assembled at the schoolhouse and strolled idly about the banks of the brook, but no schoolmaster. Hans van Ripper now began to feel some uneasiness about the fate of poor Ichabod and his saddle. An inquiry was set on foot, and after diligent investigation they came upon his traces. On one part of the road leading to the church was found the saddle, trampled in the dirt. The tracks of horses' hooves, deeply dented in the road and evidently at furious speed, were traced to the bridge, beyond which, on the bank of a broad part of the brook, where the water ran deep and black, was found the hat of the unfortunate Ichabod, and close beside it a shattered pumpkin. The old country wives, who are the best judges of these matters, maintain to this day that Ichabod was spirited away by supernatural means, and it is a favorite story often told about the neighborhood round the winter evening fire. The bridge became more than ever an object of superstitious awe, and that may be the reason why the road has been altered of late years so as to approach the church by the border of the mill pond. The schoolhouse being deserted soon fell to decay and was reported to be haunted by the ghost of the unfortunate pedagogue and the plowboy, loitering homeward of a still summer evening, has oft fancied his voice at a distance, chanting a melancholy psalm tune among the tranquil solitudes of Sleepy Hollow. "Faith, sir," replied the storyteller, "as to that matter, I don't believe one half of it myself." So thank you for enjoying a very much truncated version of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. I do apologize. I did not realize it was going to be so long and so in-depth, but I will keep that for next time. We might do this again next year. But in the meantime, I believe that Mr. Alex Hom has one more story to share. Or two. We'll see. We'll see how the night goes. Oh, Alex.
Hello again, everyone. I do have 2 more stories to share, if y'all would please indulge me. Give me 1 second, I shall pull it up in 1 moment. You know what? I will have it on my phone. Give me 1 second. I hope you're all enjoying the story time. And is a wonderful host. And he's sneaking in under me right now. This story is another story that I've read before, but doing a bit of a redux as well, and it is called The Vanishing of Jack Turner. I never was a good kid. All my life, I learned that the only way to make it up in the world was to be strong. And I didn't know what that meant when I was a dumb, inexperienced child. I thought to be strong was to show it. I pushed around all the small fries of the school to assert my dominance, to show that I wasn't weak. This pushing evolved into me being physically abusive towards anyone I deemed below me. I was the school bully. This got me expelled so many times, causing my family to move over and over just for me to have an education. This kept happening all up until high school, freshman year, when I met a senior named Jack Turner. Jack was a quiet guy, always keeping to himself. He didn't have any friends. Not even the social outcasts wanted him. All he did in his years in high school, I assume, is simply do his schoolwork and go home. As a freshman, I felt like I needed to make myself appear strong and dominant, so I wasn't bullying myself. Jack was simply the best option. He was an upperclassman. A freshman who dominated a senior would truly show the school who is strong and superior, right? As I said before, I was a stupid and misguided kid. The harassment started small, calling Jack names and slurs. Then I began to vandalize his work. Then I began to abuse him physically. These are actions I'm not proud to say I've done. It makes me sick how fucked up of a human I was back then. Anyway, the first semester is done and suddenly Jack vanishes from school. I took this as a victory, thinking I defeated a senior. A week goes by and the county I live in gets an alert. Person missing, Jack Turner. If you know the whereabouts of this person, contact authorities immediately. I couldn't believe it. The guy I was tormenting actually vanished and went missing. This was when I got a pit in my stomach. Could I have actually led him to suicide, I pondered? Days go by and Jack is nowhere to be found. It was a week later on Tuesday when things started acting up. I returned home from school when I began hearing creaking from above in my room. At this point in time, my parents weren't home as they were both busy working. I walked upstairs and I entered the hallway. My door was closed. I specifically remember I left it open on my way to school that day, but it was closed. As I open the door, I find my room to be untouched. Nothing was out of place, nothing was stolen, nothing was pushed out. Nothing seemed to have happened in my room. That is, until I saw a note on my desk, which I know wasn't there before I left. The note simply read, "Flip to the other side." Oh God. I followed the instruction and flipped the note. It's Jack. It's a photo of Jack. His hair looked unkempt and messy. I called authorities immediately. Police arrived at my door and I showed them the picture. They brought me into questioning. I told them everything. How I harassed this kid who might have had mental issues. My parents come to pick me up from the station. But not before the guy asking the questions told me to watch out for myself and to go to therapy for my violent tendencies and superiority complex. It was a Sunday night when I found him. I spent that night playing video games since I couldn't sleep. While playing Crash Bandicoot, I heard something tumble in the attic. Feeling uneasy, I went over to my parents' room quietly. I woke them up, telling them something is in the attic. My father got out of bed to check it out. I followed suit. My father opened the attic and went up the stairs. I again followed suit. We found nothing original. That is, until I saw a figure in the corner of my eye. I alarmed my father, and that's when we saw him. Jack was shirtless, showing us his disgustingly malnourished torso. His hair was down to his shoulders, slimy and flaky. When he stood up, his legs wobbled as if he was using all of his strength. When he tried to speak, all that came out was a breathy squeak. Jack then started to, or at least try, to run. He tumbled and tripped his way towards the attic window. He smashed the window with his fist, and he jumped. My father immediately called 911 while I was fixated on where he was and when we found Jack. On the floor were photos. Photos of me. In a neat pile next to him was a used stack of paper. Most of the sheets were filled with gibberish, but one was clear as day. In sketchy bold letters, Jack spelt out, "Kill." And on the back was a list. Kill mother first. Slice the neck using the kitchen knife. Kill father second. Smash his head in. Torture the tormentor, showing him my pain. Burn the house down with tormentor inside. An ambulance arrived and took Jack away. He miraculously survived the fall and was nursed back to health, but his mental state was too far gone. He was taken to an asylum for treatment. That year of my life changed who I was as a person, teaching me that acting that way was going to get me killed or get other people killed. I took therapy later that year, during the summer, and I came out a better man. I graduated high school with a diploma. I'm writing this story because my past came back to haunt me. I found out that Jack left the asylum yesterday, and I found a photo posted on the door to my house. It's a photo of me.
Thank you all for listening. That's the end of the second story. And I will pass it over to our next host again, to Ashley Thereon, to take on their second story. I hope you all enjoy.
The returns.
Yes, I'll let.
Everything's fucked up now. Damn it. Great. Here comes the tombstone and the face. And bye.
No sure, demon. Dylan. Where's my stuff? Oh, there. Hey guys, you like anime? This is a cool story about anime. Saki Sonobashi, the lost anime. Anime is extremely popular the world over. Many of us enjoy watching things like shonen action and the like. However, I tend to like older anime, like Akira and Perfect Blue. Older anime that didn't shy away from things like violence, sex, gore. A far cry from the cartoons here in the West. One night, I had my friends over, and we had a tradition that every month we'd get together and binge watching anime for the entire night. Sounds familiar. As we brainstormed which anime to binge, one of my friends suggested something very obscure, Saki Sonobashi. All of us were puzzled. What's so obscure about that? I asked. Well, for starters, it can only be found on the deep web, on a hentai gore site. This is according to my brother, who gave me instructions on how to get there, which I have written down. My brother is an avid explorer of the deep web. Ooh, my. And secondly, the story is behind it is much scarier than the anime itself. I'll save that story for when we finish it. It lasts about 30 minutes. All right, I guess, I responded. My other friends were enthusiastic about it as well. After some time setting up the PC and whatnot, my friend proceeded to search for the video based on the instructions. He found it 20 minutes of intense searching and fierce scrolling. There it was, Saki Sonobashi. My friend explained it was animated in the 80s and it was very cheaply made. We all thought nothing of it, really, but boy, were we wrong. The first 15 minutes. The anime opens with 9 girls stuck in a large bathroom without doors, windows, or mirrors. Only one faucet is drawn. These girls were all animated in a similar fashion, with only the hair being distinguished. Bear in mind, absolutely no effort was put into this. All movement came from their mouths, and shots were all the same. One of them was sitting in the group, and the rest were in similarly individual shots with only their hair being changed. What's more, it had no audio, only subtitles in Japanese, which were translated into English. It is not known how they got there in the first place, but one could piece together theories based on their life stories. As an example, one of the girls, who had a Hime blonde haircut, was the daughter of a Yakuza member, while the other, same face with black hair, no bangs, was of a well-established politician. Think of what you want. Think of what you want of the information, but I can care less. That is the least important information. The mood of the anime starts off very positive. These girls, despite their circumstances, have hope that they'll find a way out. One was religious. She cited her belief in God, gave her promise of a happy ending. The other two, with powerful parents, believed that they find them just in time. Everything happens for a reason in life, one said. At this point, I thought it was pretty odd they'd act so calmly considering their situation. My friend assured me to go on with it. The girls told philosophical stories to each other. The screen faded to black. The last 15 minutes. A red text appeared in Japanese, translated into English. It said, 5 days later. At this point, the girls looked like they were starving. Their eyes were as lifeless as their body. As it turns out, none of them had eaten for 5 days. The blonde girl with the hime cut even mentioned she couldn't go to sleep out of hunger and fear. As a side montage of each of the girls, the screen cut to the blonde girl screaming and yelling. The only audio throughout the whole video. My God, it sounded so authentic. The same girl proceeded to smash her head onto the wall. I lost count of how many times she did. What shocked me most was none of the other girls bothered to help her. My God, the drawings were so precise, despite how cheaply it was made. Only a madman could have made this. Suddenly, the montage started yet again. This time, it cut to one of the girls scratching her neck so intensely it let out as much blood as she could. A few other girls followed. The girl with the black hair asked one of the other girls to drown her in the sink because she simply couldn't do it herself. I witnessed her being held down by her friend as she drowned. The anime ended with a shot of the girl lying down on the bathroom floor, all of them dead. The screen faded to black. What the hell, man? Shouted one of my friends. We were all shocked, but we kept our composure. Honestly, I was pretty desensitized to this stuff. However, I wasn't prepared for what my friend explained afterward. The truth was, the anime was written and mostly drawn by a serial killer who lurked in the shadows of Japan beginning in the 80s. The anime was created before he drugged and trapped those innocent girls in the bathroom. It is said that the audio of the blonde girl screaming was one of his previous victims. It is estimated he took around 6 years. starting in the late 70s to complete the animation by himself, which would explain the very cheap quality of it. He was never found. The only thing found was the infamous bathroom alongside the bodies and the tapes containing the anime. For a long time, the anime was stored away, only to be rediscovered in 2018 after a leak. It's theorized the police preserved the tape digitally for further study. Due to censorship, you couldn't find it on the regular web. Anyway, I wrote this to bring attention to the case in hopes they'll eventually catch whoever did this and bring justice to the innocent girls murdered. Sounds like a banger! Boom!
All right. Wait, what was that, Ashley? Yeah, no, I was about to say, that's fucking brutal, dude. That's real brutal. But yes, hello, I am back yet again. And don't worry, my next story is not nearly as long as what Sleepy Hollow was gonna be. But I have chosen another classic Edgar Allan Poe tale. The Cask of Amontillado. Let me just double check how long this is. Make sure. Okay, that's doable. That's like 2, 4, 6 pages. We goody. That's not a whole book. That's not a whole book. Anyhoozle, here we are again. So, alrighty. Let me go ahead. Oh, what are you doing? What did you do? Everything's fucked up. Damn it, Ashley, I blame you. Sure you didn't. Everything's messed up now. Everything's gone to hell. There we go. Anyways. Okay, goofiness aside. The Cask of Amontillado. The 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had borne as best I could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. You, who so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. At length, I would be avenged. This was a point definitively settled, but the very definitiveness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. A wrong is unredressed when retribution overtakes its redresser. It is equally unredressed when the avenger fails to make himself felt as such to him who has done the wrong. It must be understood that neither by word nor deed had I given Fortunato cause to doubt my goodwill. I continued, as was my wont, to smile in his face, and he did not perceive that my smile now was the thought of his immolation. He had a weak point, this Fortunato. Although in other regards he was a man to be respected and even feared, he prided himself on his connoisseurship in wine. Few Italians have the true virtuoso spirit. For the most part, their enthusiasm is adopted to suit the time and opportunity, to practice imposture upon the British and Austrian millionaires. In painting and gimmery, Fortunato, like his countrymen, was a quack. But in the matter of old wines, he was sincere. In this respect, I did not differ from him materially. I was skillful in the Italian vintages myself, and bought largely whenever I could. It was about dusk one evening during the supreme madness of the Carnival season that I encountered my friend. He accosted me with excessive warmth, for he had been drinking much. The man wore motley. He had on a tight-fitting party-striped dress, and his head was surmounted by the conical cap and bells. I was so pleased to see him that I thought I should never have done wringing his hand. I said to him, "My dear Fortunato, you are luckily met. How remarkably well you are looking today. But I have received a pipe of what passes for Amontillado, and I have my doubts." "Oh, how?" said he. "Amontillado? A pipe? Impossible! And in the middle of the carnival!" "I have my doubts," I replied, "and I was silly enough to pay the full Amontillado price without consulting you in the matter. You were not to be found, and I was fearful of losing a bargain." "Amontillado? I have my doubts." "Amontillado? And I must satisfy them." "Oh, Amontillado! And as you are engaged, I am on my way to Lucchesi. If anyone has a critical turn, it is he. He will tell me, Lucchesi cannot tell Amontillado from sherry. And yet some fools will have it that his taste is a match for your own. Come, let us go. Whither? To your vaults. My friend, no. I will not impose upon your good nature. I perceive you have an engagement. Lucchesi, I have no engagement. Come. My friend, no, it is not the engagement, but the severe cold with which I perceive you are afflicted. The vaults are insufferably damp, and they are encrusted with... The fuck is that word? Niter. Niter. I'm going to say niter. I'll tap in the chat for you. Niter. I am not pronouncing that the way I think it is. Niter. Let us go, nevertheless. The code is merely nothing. Amontillado, you have been imposed upon, and as for Lucchesi, he cannot distinguish sherry from Amontillado, the quack. Thus speaking, Fortunato repossessed himself of my arm, putting on a mask of black silk and drawing a roquelaire closely about my person. I suffered him to hurry me to my palazzo. There were no attendants at home. They had absconded to make merry in honor of the time. I had told them I should not return until the morning, and had given them explicit orders not to stir from the house. These orders were sufficient, I well knew, to ensure their immediate disappearance, one and all, as soon as my back was turned. I took from their sconces 2 flambeaux, and giving one to Fortunato, bowed him through several suites of rooms to the archway that led into the vaults. I passed down a long, winding staircase, requesting him to be cautious as he followed. We came at length to the foot of the descent, and stood together on the damp ground of the catacombs of the Montresors. The gait of my friend was unsteady, and the bells upon his cap jingled as he strode. "The pipe?" said he. It is further on," said I, "but observe the white webwork which gleams from these cavern walls." He turned towards me, and looked into my eyes with 2 filmy orbs that distilled the rheum of intoxication. "Niter?" he asked at length. Niter, I replied. "How long have you had that cough?" Ad infinitum. My poor friend found it impossible to reply for many minutes. "It is nothing," he said at last. "Come," said I, with decision. "We will go back. Your health is precious. You are rich, respected, admired, beloved. You are happy as once was I. You are a man to be missed. For me, it is no matter. We will go back. You will be ill, and I cannot be responsible. Besides, there is Lucchesi." "Enough, Lucchesi," he said. "The cough is a mere nothing. It will not kill me. I shall not die of a cough." True, I replied. And indeed, I had no intention of alarming you unnecessarily, but you should use all proper caution. A draught of this Medoc will defend us from the damps. Here I knocked off the neck of a bottle, which I drew from a long row of its fellows that lay upon the mold. "Drink," I said, presenting him the wine. He raised it to his lips with a leer. He paused and nodded to me familiarly, while his bells jingled. "I drink," he said, "to the buried that repose around us." That the buried that repose around us. Like, he's intoxicated, okay? I can't make that up. He's fucked up. "And I to your long life." He again took my arm, and we proceeded. These vaults, he said, "are extensive." The Montresors, I replied, were a great and numerous family. "I forget your arms." A huge human foot door in a field azure. The foot crushes a serpent rampant whose fangs are embedded in the heel. "And the motto?" "Nemo me epion lacessit." "Good," he said. The wine sparkled in his eyes, and the bells jingled. His own fancy grew warm with the Medoc. We had passed through walls of piled bones with casks and puncheons intermingling, into the inmost recesses of the catacombs. I paused again, and this time I made bold to seize Fortunato by an arm above the elbow. "No!" Yes, of course. "The Niter," I said. See, it increases. It hangs like moss upon the vaults. We are below the river's bed. The drops of moisture trickle among the bones. Come, we will go back. It is too late. Your cough. It is nothing, he said. Let us go on. But first, another draught of the Medoc. I broke and reached him a flaschen of de Grave. He emptied it at a breath. His eyes flashed with a fierce light. He laughed and drew the bottle upwards with a gesticulation I did not understand. I looked at him in surprise. He repeated the movement, a grotesque one. You do not comprehend, he said. Not I replied. Then you are not of the Brotherhood. How? You are not of the Masons? Yes, I replied. Yes, I am. You? Impossible. A Mason? A Mason, I replied. A sign, he said. It is this, I answered, producing a trowel from beneath the folds of my roquelaire. You jest, he exclaimed, recoiling a few paces. But let us proceed to the Amontillado. Be it so, I said, replacing the tool beneath the cloak, and again offering him my arm. He leaned upon it heavily. We continued our route in search of the Amontillado. We passed through a range of low arches, descended, passed on, and descending again, arrived at a deep crypt in which the foulness of the air caused our flambeau rather to glow than flame. At the most remote end of the crypt there appeared yet another less spacious. Its walls had been lined with human remains, piled to the vault overhead, in the fashion of the great catacombs of Paris. 3 sides of this interior crypt were still ornamented in this manner. From the fourth, the bones had been thrown down and lay promiscuously upon the earth, forming at one point a mound of some size. Within the wall, thus exposed by the displacing of the bones, we perceived a still interior recess, in depth about 4 feet, in width 3, and height 6 or 7. It seemed to have been constructed for no especial use within itself, but formed merely the interval between 2 of the colossal supports of the roof of the catacombs, and was backed by one of the circumscribing walls of solid granite. It was in vain that Fortunato, uplifting his dull torch, endeavored to pry into the depths of the recess. Its termination the feeble light did not enable us to see. Proceed, I said. Herein is the Amontillado. As for Lucchesi, he is an ignoramus, interrupted my friend, as he stepped unsteadily forward, while I followed immediately at his heels. In an instant, he had reached the extremity of the niche, and finding his progress arrested by the rock, stood stupidly bewildered. A moment more, and I had fettered him to the granite. In its surface were 2 iron staples, distant from each other about 2 feet, horizontally. From one of these depended a short chain, from the other, a padlock. Throwing the links about his wrist, it was but the work of a few seconds to secure it. He was too much astounded to resist. Withdrawing the key, I stepped from the recess. Pass your hand, I said, over the wall. You cannot help feeling the nitre. Indeed, it is very damp. Once more, let me implore you to return. No? Then I must positively leave you. But I must first render you all the little attentions in my power. The Amontillado? Ejaculated my friend, not yet recovered from his astonishment. Ejaculation here meaning to project and speak, not to jerk off, just clarifying. True, I replied. The Amontillado. As I said these words, I busied myself among the pile of bones, of which I have before spoken. Throwing them aside, I soon uncovered a quantity of building stone and mortar. With these materials and with the aid of my trowel, I began vigorously to wall up the entrance of the niche. I had scarcely laid the first tier of my masonry when I discovered that the intoxication of Fortunato had in great measure worn off. The earliest indication I had of this was a low moaning cry from the depth of the recess. It was not the cry of a drunken man. There was then a long and obstinate silence. I laid the second tier, and the third, and the fourth, and then I heard the furious vibrations of the chain. The noise lasted for several minutes, during which, that I might hearken to it with the more satisfaction, I ceased my labors and sat upon the bones. When at last the clanking subsided, I resumed the trowel and finished without interruption the 5th, 6th, and 7th tiers. The wall was now nearly upon a level with my breast. I again paused, and holding the flambeau over the masonwork, threw a few feeble rays upon the figure within. A succession of loud and shrill screams bursting suddenly from the throat of the chained form seemed to thrust me violently back. For a brief moment I hesitated. I trembled. Unsheathing my rapier, I began to grope with it about the recess, but the thought of an instant reassured me. I placed my hand upon the solid fabric of the catacombs and felt satisfied. I reapproached the wall. I replied to the yells of whom I clamored. I re-echoed. I aided. I surpassed them in volume and in strength. I did this, and the clamorer grew still. It was now midnight, and my task was drawing to a close. I had completed the 8th, 9th, and 10th tiers. I had finished a portion of the last and the 11th. There remained but a single stone to be fitted and plastered in. I struggled with its weight. I placed it partially in its destined position. But now there came out from the niche a low laugh that erected the hairs upon my head. It was succeeded by a sad voice, which I had difficulty in recognizing as that of the noble Fortunato. The voice said, "A very good joke indeed. An excellent jest. We will have many a rich laugh about it at the palazzo over our wine." "The Amontillado," I said. Yes, the Amontillado. Is it not getting late? Will not they be awaiting us at the palazzo, the Lady Fortunato, and then the rest? Let us be gone." "Yes," I said. "Let us be gone." "For the love of God, Montressor!" "Yes," I said. "For the love of God." But to these words I hearkened in vain for a reply. I grew impatient. I called out, "Fortunato!" No answer. I called again. "Fortunato!" No answer still. I thrust a torch through the remaining aperture and let it fall within. There came forth in return only a jingling of the bells. My heart grew sick on account of the dampness of the catacombs. I hastened to make an end of my labor. I forced the last stone into its position, plastered it up. Against the new masonry, I re-erected the old ramparts of bones. For the half of a century, no mortal has disturbed them. Requiescat in pace. And that is the tale of the cask of Amontillado. God damn your skibbity riz, Ashley, son of a fucking Protestant hooker. Son of a Protestant hooker. My mantle does not approve. Now, Alex, I do believe you have one more story to tell, do you not? Excellent, excellent. Come forth, that is the last of Edgar Allan Poe, and here come the last rounds of our stories, as told by Alex Houghton and one more Ashley Thereon.
Greetings again, everyone tuning in. This is my last story for the evening, and it comes from the same source as the last one, so I hope you enjoy. This one is called My Job is to Watch People Die. If you met me on the street and asked me what my job was, I would tell you that I work from home consulting for an industrial laundry company. That is, after all, the cover story I've been provided with. The reality, my job is even simpler. Every Friday night, I dress up nice, report to the certain theater downtown, have a seat, and watch a performance. That's it. All it takes is a couple hours of my week, and I end up making 6 figures a year with every benefit you could possibly ask for. I know, it sounds too good to be true. Pretty much anybody on the planet would kill to have a job like mine. At least, perhaps, until they find out just what kind of performances I'm made to attend. Before I start, though, I need you to keep in mind that I'm a good person. I donate thousands to the Rainforest Fund out of my every paycheck, and me and my kids volunteer at the food bank weekly. I'm a devout believer, and I'm going to heaven when I die, I'm sure. After all, I, myself, have never hurt anybody, never raised a hand to injure a living soul. How could you possibly call me a sinner when all I ever do is watch? It started about 3 years ago, when their job offer found me, when I was at my most desperate. All I was told was every Friday night, I would attend a performance at my city's fanciest theater. That was it. I was baffled at first. What the hell do I know about theater or ballet or orchestras? Had they gotten me mixed up with some big shot critic? During our talk on the phone, however, they politely reassured me that no critical ability would be required. All we ask, they said, is for you to be there to bear witness. Everything about it screamed scam, but I figured, what the hell? Worst case scenario, I listen to a pitch for some MLM or timeshare, politely decline, and then walk out with some pocket money. I was baffled when I pulled up to the theater. Dozens, maybe even hundreds of people were streaming in, all in nice suits and gorgeous gowns. I'd thrown on the fanciest clothes I could afford, yet I still felt severely underdressed. The theater was totally rented out by my employer, and only my fellow co-workers were allowed in. How much could it have cost to hire such a massive crowd just to attend this one performance? Who could possibly bankroll something like this? I tried to empty my mind and simply merge into that human tidal wave flowing through the doors. Every staff member was dressed in a refined all-black suit with black tie and undershirt, to the point they seemed to darken the air around them. Each wore a white comedy mask. The neoprene stretched into a grin and perpetual laughter, which struck me with almost mocking. They demanded that we hand over all electronic devices, even patted us down and running a metal detector over us. Then they reminded all attending not to leave their seats under any circumstances during the performance, recommending we take bathroom breaks before the show started, and to remain quiet and to keep our eyes open. They kept repeating the same mantra: no distractions, no diversions, no lapses in concentration. Remember, you are here to bear witness. If I'd been alone, I would have left right then and there. There was a tickling in the back of my brain, some primal part of me screaming that there was something terribly wrong here, but mob mentality is a hell of a thing. Everybody else seemed calm, nonplussed, handed their phones over without a fuss. There were a few holdouts, probably other newbies like me, but eventually they too relented. If everyone else is going along with it, I figured, why shouldn't I? Who wants to be the one single paranoid bastard who missed out on an easy paycheck? Stepping into the gorgeous theater like something out of 3 centuries ago, I was most struck by the make of the stage. It looked like the back action of a piano. Strange levers and mahogany hammers looking like fingers manipulating countless lines of piano wire, some over a dozen feet long. All the taut wires stretched in bizarre formations across the stage reminded me, somehow, of a spider's web. I could not fathom a machine so complex, yet with such little apparent purpose. The nature of the performance always varies. Sometimes it's work of Shakespeare, a ballet, an opera, hell, even a puppet show. That day, it was a concert featuring a small chamber orchestra of around 35. Students, it looked like, young and inexperienced, with a nervous air about them as if it was their first time performing before such a crowd. Mostly a string section, plus one of each woodwind, and just a couple each on horns and percussion. The conductor was one of the staff members in the comedy masks. I was baffled. Who would put this much cash just for a small green orchestra to play such a massive, prestigious venue? One of them must be a billionaire's kid, I figured. It was the only explanation. This, I've since realized, is always the best part. The beginning of the performance, when you can, if you try, lose yourself in the display and pretend everything is okay, that it's all normal. It
was best on those lucky days when the performers on stage were completely unaware of just what sort of danger they were in. That always makes it easier for everybody. On that first day, I was as oblivious as they were, and simply enjoyed the music. Maybe some snob of the orchestral arts would hear their amateurish mistakes, but to my untrained ear, they sounded just fine. Pleasant, even. But one question began to worm its way into my head. A small nagging at first, which crescendoed into a hammering on the inside of my skull. How much time has passed? At a certain point, I suspected the intermission was long overdue, but there were no windows, and I had to part with my electronic wristwatch at the door, so really, getting any sense of time was impossible. I dismissed it as a lousy attention span at first, but eventually, others began taking notice. No one dared speak, but among the fellow newbies, I noticed furrowed brows and sideways glances, confused and concerned. The performers seemed to be getting restless as well, whispering and gesturing to each other, and the conductor, who never ceased those robotic sweeping motions of his gloved hands. It must have been 2 hours by then, if I had to guess, and they were starting to look exhausted, dehydrated. Some even looked as if they were about to quit playing. Continue performing. In a moment, all of the piano wire loudly reverberated and stretched taut with the movements of those mechanical contraptions on stage, as the whole thing bristled and tensed, as though it were a living thing. And that voice, cracking like thunder, seemed to emerge from the stage itself with a mechanical roar like the grinding of metal on metal. That seemed to frighten them into submission for a while. It wasn't until a half hour later my life changed irreparably. They had been playing a quiet sonata, so everyone could hear the sudden... I don't know what's written. So everyone could hear the sudden sound, accompanied by a pained yelp. My eyes leapt to the one of the violinists. One of her strings had broken, and happened to snap right into her eye. I could see a streak of scarlet bifurcate her pupil, before the emerging blood replaced the entire eye with a thick redness. She stood, clutching a hand over her eye and blindly gasping with the other, gesturing for medical help. And as she did so, the strange lattice of levers and hammers and pulleys all roared and clacked to life, like a bear trap being sprung. The machine's efficacy was just as sudden, just as brutal. Those clockwork edifices moved like a pair of robotic arms, aiming a wire for her neck, as if trying to garrote her. But they moved at such a speed that the wire seemed to pass through her, like she wasn't even there. For a moment she seemed fine, unaffected, as if nothing had happened at all. And then, things began to fall off her. Her head, severed at the neck, alongside the hand she'd been holding over her eye, and the very fingertips of her other hand, which she had been grasping a little too high. All had been cut cleanly, with surgical precision. Time seemed to slow as they all went clattering wetly to the floor, and the girl's body soon followed, as if it took a few moments for gravity to set in, or perhaps for her body to realize she was dead. It happened so fast. It was so hard to be properly horrified. It was more like awe, maybe. Everybody stared at the chunks of meat that had once been a promising young woman with hopes and dreams. That spiderweb of wires was still rumbling and shaking all around them, and the mechanical voice roared once more, "Continue performing." There were no further warnings. A few of them jumped from their seats out of sheer instinct, not even thinking. None of them made it more than a step before the wires divided them in twain. The rest just kept playing exactly as they had been, as if their brain froze up at what they'd witnessed and simply ran on autopilot, until their faculties slowly returned to them and realized that this instinct had saved their lives. Where once beauty filled the room, now the orchestra had been reduced to a discordant sound like a long shuddering whine, like a mocking parody of music. They gripped their instruments with trembling, sweaty hands, playing just well enough to avoid stroking the ire of those quivering wires stretched taut all around them. They realized gradually that they were allowed to speak. Immediately they began wailing hard enough almost to mercifully drown out the dismal cacophony that was once music, some begging and pleading with the staff, others screaming out threats, be they legal or physical. Nothing they said could shake the masked man and woman in the slightest.
They stood at order like statues, unflinching. Realizing this, they turned their attention to us. A wall of red, weepy eyes scanned the crowd for any hint of mercy, begging us to band together against the staff, calling us all sick bastards from just sitting there and watching them die. A blonde woman on violin had the most genius and cruel strategy of all. She merely began telling us about herself. Everything she could think of, poured out in between sniffles and tears. My name is Farah Hayes. That's my husband, over there. She gestured to a dark man on the drums. He'd been the quietest of them all, seeming to be saving his strength. We have a little girl. She's 8 years old, and she loves her mama and papa. Her name is Lucy. She loves horses, and I was saving for us to maybe give her riding lessons one day. I desperately wanted to cover my ears, but knew it would be against the rules. Why can't she just shut the hell up? I thought, bitterly grinding my teeth. I truly hated her. Hated her more than I'd ever hated before. But why? Some dim remnant of my reason asked. She's a victim here. She's done no wrong. But I realized I hated her because she kept reminding me she was human. Reminding me of what I was doing to her. What we were all doing to her, sitting here in complicity. And it almost worked too. I almost resolved to save her. But then came the boom of a gunshot from far behind me. The shot had come from one of the tragedians standing amid the upper gallery. I was certain. I almost made the mistake of looking back. Instead, I kept my eyes locked forward and merely imagined who it was that had just had their brains splattered across their seat. Had they snuck a phone in and tried calling 911? Had they tried making a break for it? Or maybe they just couldn't take it anymore and made the fatal decision to look away from the horror. I tried to distract myself by studying the impossible mechanism, animating the blood-soaked piano wire. I couldn't figure it out. It was an impossible machine, existing in defiance all basic laws of geometry, and seemed to have no means of controlling it, instead operating automatically with some malign intelligence. Perhaps it was an extension of whatever creature composed the stage itself. It was a living thing. Of that much I'm certain. It breathed beneath the performers, and their blood soaked into its floorboards in moments, as if consumed. After some hours, the orchestra had gone quiet, having screamed themselves hoarse. I couldn't imagine being in their shoes. Even just watching them perform was a test of endurance. Many of them were oozing blood all over their instruments, from scarlet cuts where their skin had split. The woman on the French horn was struggling hardest of all, her lungs and hands burning with exhaustion. I can't, she eventually cried out in a hoarse little wheeze, horn slamming to the floor as her body gave out. I'm so sorry. I can't do any... A wire passed through her flesh in an instant, and suddenly she had no mouth to speak, no eyes to see, no mind to think with. All of it lay splattered upon the stage, which sated itself upon the spilled pate. Another gunshot. I quivered in my seat, sweat beading on my forehead from the terror. Somebody in the audience had looked away, and I realized I had just been about to do the same thing, had the sudden sound not knocked me out of my stupor. Most of the performance went in similar ways over the next few hours, either making mistakes of their bodies or their bodies giving out. As monstrous as it may sound, I was quietly praying for them to get it over with. They were dead the moment they walked on stage. Why drag it out for all these hours just for the inevitable to happen anyway? I recognize now that it's almost impossible to make that choice, to simply give in and accept death in defiance of all natural instincts. But the auditorium now reeked from the audience members voiding their bowels, and the damn woman next to me just wouldn't stop crying. Wouldn't stop at all. Vera and her husband lasted the longest of all, perhaps because they had each other. Over a dozen hours had passed, maybe even 2, and they were still playing a little duet in perfect sync, despite everything. By now, they were simply talking to each other as if nothing was wrong, as if we weren't even watched. Baby, when we get out of here, I'm going to take you to Martha's Vineyard. I know I've been saying this for so long, but God, I wasted so much money on that stupid fucking motorcycle, he said. Lucy's going to love it. Vera chuckled. I don't know. It might be boring for our little girl. Isn't it a bunch of old people up there? He laughed weakly. Oh, maybe in town, but you know her. Once you get her in the water, you can't get her back out. She's a natural-born swimmer, I swear. Think we'll see her in the Olympics one day? It was so surreal to watch. like I was peeking in on a private conversation a couple was having in their own home. But I could tell both of them were trying to maintain some illusion of normalcy, anything to keep themselves psychologically intact as the hours pass. Even as they tried to smile and laugh, there was a quiver in their tone, a desperation, a fear of what might happen if there was a single break in the conversation. A lot of what they said was too personal to relay here. They went into old regrets, past mistakes, resolved every argument they had ever had in all their years together. It was like they wanted to make sure they said everything they had to say before the end came. I think I owe them, at least, their privacy. But the husband was slowly deteriorating. He'd moved too quick, caught the symbol with his hand, leaved a wide gash along his palm that was gushing blood at a terrifying rate. Now he was getting woozier and woozier, swaying dizzily, his eyes unfocused, his speech becoming slurred, and his playing sloppy. Vera desperately tried to keep him focused. "Talk to me, baby. Think of the beach. Lucy's going to love the seashells. She'll pick her favorite and put it on that little stand in her room with all her little trophies." She rambled on, but by the end, all he could manage was a half-hearted grunts of affirmation. He was leaning in his seat, and then his drumstick went flying right out of his hand, sending a cloud of pink mist through the air along its path. And yet he kept going through the motions of playing, as if he didn't notice. Then, a sudden clarity formed in his eyes, and he stared at his empty hand in disbelief. And then the piano wire was tensing and strumming all around him. And then in an instant, he was up from his seat, racing toward us. He knew it was over. He just wanted to strike out at the world if he could. One last act of defiance. He even locked eyes with me, and I'll never forget the look on his face. "Why are you watching this? You sick bastards! You sick, twisted..." He threw his remaining drumstick, and the trajectory would have delivered it right to me. But the piano wires lacerated it in midair, slicing it into 100 different directions until it disappeared into a cloud of sawdust. And then they did the same to him. Vera didn't scream or sob. She just tensed and let out the tiniest little gasp, like when you're at the doctor's and know the shot is inevitable, but it still stings anyway. And then she was all alone. She looked at us like she wanted to speak, wanted to say something, to express what was happening inside her. But what was left to say? She'd spent almost a full day screaming herself hoarse with every combination of words she could think of. None of it helped. None of it meant anything. Instead, she expressed herself through music. She began to play the most mournful, sobering solo I'd ever heard. One I knew she was making up as she went along. One with which she communicated those parts of herself that words could not encompass. She stared us down, eyes red and bloodshot, making eye contact individually, as if to remind us that we were that we were not a shapeless mass, that we were all individually responsible. I only barely remember the sound of it now, as if I'd heard it in a dream, and yet even now the memory tears at my heart. She performed for what felt like an eternity, and then in the end, she slowly, calmly set down her violin, stood up, and took a bow. And then, she was unmade. Everyone stood up around me all of a sudden, and I was immediately caught up in it too, performing a standing ovation that dragged on and on. We screamed, shouted, cried, threw things, smashed our fists against seats, tore at our hair, laughed and danced with each other. It was the ultimate catharsis after all that silence, after a full day of holding it in. Never before had I felt so connected to a crowd of people on some deep, spiritual level. We marched out of the theater, stumbling like a procession of ghouls with blank faces and tired eyes. The staff were as polite as ever, thanking us for attending the performance and hoping that we enjoyed the show. Some were dragging the bodies of shot audience members out of the theater. As I finally emerged into the outside world, I was stunned to find it. It was still the same night I had entered. At least 20 hours had passed inside that theater, I was sure of it. But for the outside world, only 2 hours had passed. Exactly the duration listed on their job offer. I'd never been explicitly told not to reveal what I'd seen. And now I knew why. Nobody believed me. Or worse, maybe they were covering it up. I swear to God, the police dispatcher laughed at me over the phone. I swore I'd never go back. I'd been part of something evil, something unfathomable, and it would haunt me forever. But the next year was one of constant desperation. debt climbing as job opportunities declined at equal rates. I held out for about a year, but eventually, I gave in. To my horror, the next performance was easier. Now that I knew what to expect, and then the next was easier still, and then the next. The performance is always different, but the end result is always the same. I have to remind myself that I'm not culpable for what they're doing there. All I do is watch. We watch people die every day, in the news and online. People suffering horrible fates, often in places our own countries help to destabilize. How are my actions any different, really? We all have to accept that terrible things happen in this world, and all we can do about them is either look away or look the horror right in the eye. Is choosing to look away more moral, or is it only more cowardly? And besides, wouldn't it be worse for them if there wasn't an audience? If they had to die there in the dark alone, no one seeing, no one caring, no one remembering. After all, someone has to bear witness. And that's it. That was a bit longer than I was expecting, but just as gruesome and eerie and grim. Hope you all enjoyed it. I think we're going to finish off, or not finish off, but we've got Ashley Thereon maybe with one more story. All right, we've got one more from Ashley Thereon. Oh, yes, 1 second. 1 second. There we go.
Hey guys, so this is kind of a story, but this is something you can try at work. It's called the elevator game. It's a cool thing from South Korea. So the elevator game is basically trying to send you to another world. So here's how you play. Find an elevator in a building at least 10 stories high. For the best experience, go alone at night. If you like, though, you're permitted to bring a group of friends to play with you. To go in at daylight, though, you might not get the full experience. Just be aware that if any player quits while the game is going, the rest of the group might be affected. Ride the elevator past the 4th, 2nd, 6th, and 10th floor in that order, pressing the button for the next floor after the elevator arrives. It is important that that when the doors open, you don't get out. Let the doors close and keep riding the elevator. If you do exit, the game ends immediately. And it may not work another time. Ride to the 5th floor and ignore the woman who comes in the elevator. When the doors open on the 5th floor, you'll encounter a strange woman who may look familiar to you or someone in your group. She may also board the elevator. By no means should you interact with her. Wait for the doors to close so you can go to the next floor. Do not look at, speak to, or acknowledge the woman in any way. Nobody knows what happens if you do. Perhaps nobody has returned to tell the tale. The woman might ask for help or feign distress. Disregard her completely. The Dylan Noble method. Press the button to the 1st floor and see if the game continues. When you press the first button, one of two things may occur. The elevator actually takes you to the 1st floor. Immediately exit the elevator and the building, and don't look behind you. Something has gone wrong and the game is over. If you want to return home as fast as possible, you should be safe. If the elevator instead takes you to the 10th floor, the game is on, and you've entered the other world. You may leave the elevator to explore. If you end up on the 10th floor but decide to quit the game, stay in the elevator and press the button for the 1st floor again. The elevator should take you there. Exit immediately when you arrive. Exploring and returning from the other world. Exit the elevator and walk around the other world. Things may be a little different than you expect. Strange lights, odd noses, a chilling presence. Whatever you do, make sure you keep track of where you are and you can find your way back to the elevator so that you're not stuck in the other world forever. Stay focused, as it's easy to become disoriented there. Some say the other world is an alternate universe or another dimension. Whatever it is, try not to linger there for too long. Avoid touching or influencing things there. Note that your phone or other devices might not work there. Never speak to the strange young woman. The strange young woman from the 5th floor may appear to you as you explore the other world. Whatever you do, continue to ignore her. Don't look at her, speak to her, or touch her. If you encounter her, walk quickly back to the elevator and exit the other world. As before, she may try to interact with you or ask you questions. Do not engage. Note that if the strange woman boards the elevator while you're trying to leave the other world, you must wait for her to exit first before you can proceed. Return to the elevator and repeat the initial steps to leave the other world. You must return to the elevator you arrived on for this to work. Once inside, ride the elevator past the 4th, 2nd, 6th, and 10th floor, and the 5th floor in that order. Then press the button for the 1st floor. When you arrive, check your surroundings. Go straight to the exit of the building. If things don't feel right on the 1st floor, use your intuition. Repeat this step again. Only exit once it appears you're back in the real world. The elevator may try to bring you back to the 10th floor after requesting the 1st floor. Press any of the elevator's other floor buttons to disrupt it as it begins heading there. Try it at work. It sounds fun. And that's the story.
This sounds like a good time, actually. Sounds like a great time. Now, we have one more story. One final tale. We all know how it goes, it gets midnight on Halloween. It gets to midnight on Halloween, and, it's immediately Christmas time, right? Nobody has any respect for Thanksgiving. Nobody understands that there's a holiday between Halloween and Christmas. But that's quite all right, because I'm here to tell you this wonderful, wonderful tale of A Nightmare Before Christmas. So, to cap off this evening, here is the original poem that the movie is based upon. 'Twas a long time ago, longer now than it seems, in a place that perhaps you have seen in your dreams, for the story that you are about to be told began in the holiday worlds of old. Now you've probably wondered where holidays come from, and if you haven't, I'd say it's time you begun. For the holidays are the result of much fuss and hard work for the worlds that create them for us. Well, you see now, quite simply that's all they do, making one unique holiday especially for you. But once a calamity ever so great occurred when two holidays met by mistake. It was late one Halloween. It was late one fall in Halloween land, and the air had quite a chill. Against the moon a skeleton sat, alone upon the hill. He was tall and thin, with a bat bow tie. Jack Skellington was his name. He was tired and bored in Halloween land. I'm sick of the scaring, the terror, the fright. I'm tired of being something that goes bump in the night. I'm bored with leering my horrible glances, and my feet hurt from dancing those skeleton dances. I don't like graveyards. I need something new. There must be more to life than just yelling, boo. Then out from a grave with a curl and a twist came a whimpering, whining, spectral mist. It was a little ghost dog with a faint little bark and a jack-o'-lantern nose that glowed in the dark. It was Jack's dog Zero, the best friend he had. But Jack hardly noticed, which made Zero sad. All that night and through the next day, Jack wandered and walked and filled with dismay. Then deep in the forest, just before night, Jack came upon an amazing sight. Not 20 feet from the spot where he stood were 3 massive doorways carved in wood. He stood before them, completely in awe, his gaze transfixed by one special door. Entranced and excited, with a slight sense of worry, Jack opened the door to a white, windy flurry. Jack didn't know it, but he'd fallen down in the middle of a place called Christmas Town. Immersed in the light, Jack was no longer haunted. He had finally found the feeling he wanted. And so that his friends wouldn't think him a liar, he took the present-filled stockings that hung by the fire. He took candy and toys that were stacked on the shelves, and a picture of Santa with all of his elves. He took lights and ornaments and the star from the tree, and from the Christmas town sign, he took the big letter C. He picked up everything that sparkled or glowed. He even picked up a handful of snow. He grabbed it all, and without being seen, he took it all back to Halloween. Back in Halloween, a group of Jack's peers stared in amazement at his Christmas souvenirs. For his wondrous vision, none were prepared. Most were excited, though few were quite scared. For the next few days, while lightninged and thundered, Jack sat alone and obsessively wondered, why is it they get to spread laughter and cheer, while we stalk the graveyard spreading panic and fear? Well, I could be Santa, and I could spread cheer. Why does he get to do it year after year? Outraged by injustice, Jack thought, and he thought that he got an idea. Yes, why not? In Christmas Town, Santa was making some toys, when through the din he heard a soft noise. He answered the door, and to his surprise, he saw weird little creatures with strange disguise. They were altogether ugly and rather petite. As they opened their sacks, he yelled, "Trick or treat!" Then Hang-a-Ding-a-Durgan, confused Santa was shoved into a sack and taken to Halloween to see Mastermind Jack. In Halloween, everyone gathered once more, for they'd never seen a Santa before. As they gaseously gazed at this strange old man, Jack related to Santa his masterful plan. My dear Mr. Claus, I think it's a crime that you've got to be Santa all the time. But now I will give presents and I will spread cheer. We're changing places. I'm Santa this year. It says I who will say Merry Christmas to you, so you may lie in a coffin, creak doors, and yell boo. And please, Mr. Claus, don't think ill of my plan, for I'll do the best Santa job that I can. And though Jack and his friends thought they'd do a good job, their idea of Christmas was still quite macabre. They were packed up and ready on Christmas Eve day when Jack hitched his reindeer to seek into his sleek coffin sleigh. But on Christmas Eve, as they were about to begin, a Halloween fog slowly rolled in. Jack said, "We can't leave. This fog is too thick. There will be no Christmas, and I can't be Saint Nick." Then a small glowing light pierced through the fog. What could it be? It was Zero, Jack's dog! Jack said to Zero, "Zero, with your nose so bright, won't you guide my sleigh tonight?" And to be so neat, it was Zero's great dream. So he joyously flew to the head of the team. And as his skeletal sleigh started its ghostly flight, Jack cackled, "Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night!" 'Twas the nightmare before Christmas, and all through the house, not a creature was peaceful, not even a mouse. The stockings all hung by the chimney with care, when opened that morning would cause quite a scare. The children all nestled so snug in their beds, would all have nightmares of monster and skeleton heads. The moon that hung over the new-fallen snow cast an eerie pall over the city below. And Santa Claus's laughter now sounded like groans, and the jingling bells like chattering bones. And what to their wondering eyes should appear but a coffin sleigh with skeleton deer? They knew in a moment this can't be Saint Nick. From house to house, with a true sense of joy, Jack happily issued each present and toy. From rooftop to rooftop, he jumped and he skipped, leaving presents that seemed to be straight from a crypt. Unaware that the world was in panic and fear, Jack merrily spread his own brand of cheer. He visited the house of Susie and Dave. They got a Gumby and Pokey from the grave. Then onto the home of little Jane Neiman. She got a baby doll, possessed by a demon. A monstrous chain with tentacle tracks, a ghoulish puppet wielding an axe, a man-eating plant disguised as a wreath, and a vampire teddy bear with very sharp teeth. There was screams of terror, but Jack didn't hear it. He was much too involved with his own Christmas spirit. Jack finally looked down from his dark, starry frights and saw the commotion, the noise, and the light Why, they're celebrating. It looks like such fun. They're thanking me for the good job I've done. But what he thought were fireworks meant as goodwill were bullets and missiles intended to kill. Jack, then amidst the barrage of artillery fire, Jack urged the Zero to go higher and higher. And away they all flew like the storm of the thistle until they were hit by a very well-guided missile. And as they fell in the cemetery, way out of sight, was heard, "Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night." Jack pulled himself up on a large stone cross, and from there he reviewed his incredible loss. I thought I could be Santa. I had such belief. Jack was confused and filled with great grief. Not knowing where to turn, he looked toward the sky. Then he slumped on the grave, and he started to cry. And as Zero and Jack lay crumbled on the ground, they suddenly heard a familiar sound. "My dear Jack," said Santa, "I applaud your intent. I know wreaking such havoc was not what you meant, and so you are sad and feeling quite blue. But taking over Christmas was the wrong thing to do. I hope you realize Halloween's the right place for you. There's a lot more, Jack, that I'd like to say, but now I must hurry, for it's almost Christmas Day." Then he jumped into his sleigh, and with a wink of an eye, he said, "Merry Christmas to all!" Then he bid them goodbye. Back home, Jack was sad, but then, like a dream, Santa brought Christmas to the land of Halloween. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this wondrous night of spooky stories, both old and new. Hopefully, Halloween will have many scares and frights and fun for you. But in the meantime, I will catch you all in the next one. Give Ashley Thereon a clap and Alex Hom a whistle. We will see you all next Christmas thistle. Tomorrow, coming up, we have Alien Isolation. And then on Saturday, we have Gory Cuddly Carnage, followed by another stream on Sunday, yet to be announced, maybe Phasmophobia, but I'll keep y'all posted. In the meantime, I will catch you all in the next one. Happy